We're looking at part 8 now of muscle metabolism when we're considering muscle tissue. And as you can see, we're on page 301, and we just considered the idea of recovery. Okay, so I want to make a few notations about recovery and a few notations about what we just looked at here, that muscles are one of the few places, along with liver, where we store glycogen. That is to say, we can store glucose as glycogen, and we can use then glucose from the glycogen to do speed work. We can also use glycogen a little bit more smoothly and slowly as a sort of the kindling to burn fat. Okay, so when we have an endurance type of activity that involves, shall we say, a very long walk on a trail in the forest for hours, or a long run, anything that's pretty much beyond 1 mile, shall we say, on out to 10K or even a marathon or beyond, we're going to be burning mostly fat. Okay, and we're going to be doing it with the support of glucose from glycogen stored in the muscles, right? So that's the deal here, is that glucose, first of all, when we eat it, becomes available for the immediate use of activities within any cell. Most, in fact, any cell can use glucose. A few cells can store it, and that would be the liver and muscle of all kind, whether it's the muscle of the heart, cardiac muscle, or muscle of skeleton for locomotion, so that's skeletal muscle. All of them are going to store glucose. How much glucose do you store? You store enough for 1 day. How does your body know that it's storing 1 day's worth? It's based on the past 2 to 3 months of your activities. Okay, so that's how much is stored. And oftentimes then we can also assess somebody's hemoglobin A1C by noticing how much glucose actually was present but didn't get used. Okay, so if you're an active person like this person, and you're burning off, maybe you're going for a 5 to 10 mile run every day, then you're going to really be loading your muscles with a lot of glycogen, and you're going to have glycogen available. If it's not this way, if you're a person who gets no exercise, then you'll be only loading a very small amount of glycogen in the liver, very little in the muscle, very little in the heart. Okay, so these are important details, so that if the diet consists of, shall we say, desserts or sweets or that kind of thing, then we're going to be suffering from a situation in which we looked at this before with this paper from the cardiovascular diabetology handout. You have this handout. I've sent it out to you a couple times. I can send it out again. Please raise your hand and let me know that you don't have it, because this paragraph right here, the abstract, is essential for you to know that if you do have hyperglycemia, that is to say glucose that is unused in the bloodstream for a period of, let's say 4 to 8 weeks, at least 6, certainly more like 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to end up with covalent bonding of the glucose to the walls of arteries, and particularly changing the nature of the endothelial matrix of capillaries. It's called advanced glycosylation end products. I mentioned this to you before because it's, if you take the acronym AGES, AGES, the idea here is that diabetics, type 1, type 2 diabetics, are essentially aging faster than the rest of us. Okay, because they have metabolic syndrome. And that's what this paper, there's actually 2 papers on this one handout that are addressing those issues. So if you go for a run, if you have an aerobic activity, then you get the benefit at the end of the second paper here of this endothelial nitric oxide. Okay, and it has these benefits that are accruing. Okay, I just wanted to sort of wrap up our sort of energetic view here of the muscle. Now we're going to press on, and we're going to consider here the force of muscle contraction. So what is it about muscle contraction? What is it about the nature of muscle that sort of rules over the force? So you can increase the force by the number of muscle fibers recruited. So if you recruit more of the muscle fibers, more motor units, as is noted here, then you get to have a greater force from that muscle. A muscle only has so many, so then if you were to increase the size of muscle fibers, then that would also have an effect. And so hypertrophy, some people go to the gym and try to develop that, right? So the idea is that when we change muscle, when we exercise, there's really profound things that happen. One of them, of course, with endurance training is that we increase the amount of glycogen and the amount of vasculature. That includes the heart. When we do resistance training, then we can hypertrophy specific muscles. Okay, frequency of stimulation. Okay, so if you put a lot of intention and force into the stimulation, then you can get more intense results. Okay, so those are the major factors. There's also another thing that's considered here, and it's called the degree of muscle stretch. So they have a little chart over here, a little graph, that shows us what's going on. And so in one case, we have the joint completely flexed. That is to say, it's closed. The Z lines are as close as you can get. So if you've already flexed something, like I'm flexing my finger all the way, there's nowhere for it to go. So I can't do any more work with it because it's already flexed. On the other hand, I can stretch it way, way out, like over here. So I can have the finger extended to the max. Now, the problem with that is that I've pulled the myosin too far away from the actin, and it's not an ideal situation for cross-bridging. So I have to pick a midpoint. And if you look at people who do weightlifting in the Olympics, they're getting their bodies into this position in which there's a sweet spot in which they have just the right amount of flex in the joint so that they have mapped as many of the myosin heads to the actin as possible. But they've also given themselves some place to go. So this sort of like mid-range spot right here is the sweet spot where you get the most amount of cross bridges and also the most amount of forceful movement with those cross bridges, right? So this is considered the length tension sort of is described right here, length tension relationship that is ideal for the maximum amount of muscle force. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to deal with here is the nature of contraction, velocity, duration, and muscle types that have to do with all of that. So there's a couple of things that we have to consider with muscle types, fiber types, and that's the speed of contraction, so fast twitch, slow twitch, and then also what pathway is that fiber using mostly. Every fiber is going to have some level. When I say fiber, I mean muscle cell. Every muscle cell is going to have to use ATP aerobically at some point. But some of them have very few mitochondria and some have vast amounts of mitochondria, quite a difference. And so some are for speed and strength. Others are much more for endurance and lasting power. And then there's a mid-range muscle, so muscle fiber. So we have a table here. You can take a little screenshot if you need one from this. Trying to get a place here where we're not having glare. Okay, so we'll pick this up in our next episode.